Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Bell. With me is Dr. Jared Ball, and I will give him, a very long introduction in a second. But a few things I need to say. First of all, hello, Baragani, to everybody. It has been a minute. It's been something like 6 months, 5.5, 6 months was the last time I did a video or podcast, or I don't know what you call it. I'm a senior citizen, so I'm gonna call it a video. But getting the record straight. Welcome to Getting the Record Straight. It's been, like I said, 5 or 6 months since the last one when I had Naomi Floyd on, that wonderful sister, wonderful vocalist, and as you may know, I haven't been on because I concentrated all my efforts on getting my radio station, up and running on the internet. Of course, if you go to the Black Rock and Soul website and click radio, you will hear for 24/7 the music, and it's been banging. And I just want to say thank you to everybody because it's really gone beyond my expectations. We're now over 600 unique listeners. This is with no promotion or anything, but it just is a testament that people still dig great music, great black music, regardless of who's doing it, because it's worldwide, it's in pandemic, in a positive kind of sense. It's all over the world, and I've been trying to give you as much of it in as much variety as humanly possible. And I just want to say, in closing on this topic, that I'm featuring right now a record by The Last Poets featuring Jimi Hendrix, and I let people know it's an amazing record, and I don't know why it hadn't been promoted prior to that, but it has been knocking the socks off. People have just been listening, I record about 5.5 to 6.5 hours of music, and then it just streams 24/7. So it's in there. You just have to take your time and listen. But
my bad, man. I know you setting this up, and I'm not even introduced yet. But are you saying there is a track with Jimi
there's a
Hendrix
track?
and
Yes,
The Last Poets?
yes, The Last Poets and Jimi Hendrix, killing it. So listen out.
I've never even heard it.
In fact, it's called Derelia de. Wait a minute, hold on.
And I have notes. Jimmy right there on my door. Jimmy is my guy. The Last Poets are legendary.
Derelia Dufontaine is the name of the cut. Derelia Dufontaine, and it's amazing. And I'd kick that, and then Earth, Wind, and Fire, and then we're getting down with Buddy Miles and Down by the River. You don't hear this anywhere else. And then I'll go from that to Q-Tip and somebody, and Black Thought and all that. So we'll get to some of that, maybe chatting a little bit later on in the show. But anyway, people, thanks for indulging me. Rob Bell, Getting the Record Straight, and, I'm back, and we're back. And I have, this brother's been so gracious, man, to, spend some time with me, Dr. Jared Ball. And this is a busy brother. Every time I turn on YouTube, man, he's on doing something and really kicking some brilliant thoughts and ideas and commentary. He's what I would call a thought leader, and I hate using this nomenclature because it's like all academics come up with anymore in the past few decades is another way to say something that we were already familiar with from years before. But he is indeed a thought leader, certainly when it comes to black liberation and self-determination. He's a professor of communication studies at the great Morgan State University. Boy, did I used to party then. Anyway, he's got actually, Morgan brought me to, I went to after public school or prep school. And I tell you, my first visit to Morgan, to their homecoming, man, brought tears to my eyes. I had never seen so many black people, so beautiful, coming together. Another story, man, from back in the day. But anyway, he has a PhD in journalism and mass communications from the University of Maryland, an MPS, which I'm not familiar with. You got to hit me to that.
It's a master's of professional studies.
Oh, professional studies.
It's
Africana.
just a master's degree,
Yeah. And Africana Studies from Cornell University, BA in History from Frostburg State, which he just hit me to. In his bio, he says he's first husband and father. I was the former. I'm still the latter. He's a founder and curator of I Mix What I Like, and I love what he likes. He's a multimedia. I Mix What I Like is a multimedia hub of emancipatory journalism and revolutionary beat reporting. Right on. And I guess you also helped to start or did start the Black Power Media thing, right?
Yeah, I am a co-founder of Black Power Media. Yes.
So without further ado, and I could be doing all night, we have Dr. Jared Ball. Thank you so much, my brother, for coming on. Appreciate it.
So I appreciate it, and I should add for the bio, just for you for tonight, that speaking of Frostburg State, from 1997 to 1999, I was also a drummer in Western Maryland's greatest funk band for those 2 years, called Mama's Biscuits. So
okay,
yeah.
So you have real skills, you know.
Well, I played drums, but I was not a drummer. I did my. You mentioned Buddy Miles. He was actually the inspiration for my style of drumming at that time. So what are they called? The Funk Brothers at Motown used to say that was the same about Marvin Gaye. You know, he was a drummer, but he wasn't. How did you mention it again? Well, I was just saying I played drums, but I wasn't
a drummer.
Yeah.
Like, he said Marvin played drums, but he wasn't a drummer, you know.
And for me, that just means in the moment I could get a job done, but I was not a drummer. Like, okay. There's real drummers, and then there's what I was doing. But for those 2 years...
I feel you. And I'm going to take this gratuitous moment to say, I am an author of a book on music, but I have no musical skills. This was all based on, it was a book from the perspective of a fan, of someone who loved the boogie down and had a real appreciation for particularly the greatest era of music in Western history, which is, of course, the 1970s. Yeah, and we're, I'm a what do they call it, a musical, anyway. We love, all of us who came through the 70s, we're just crazy about that era,
I mean, it did its thing. That was a great era, yeah.
And we might talk about it a little later, So, anyway, Brother Ball is an author, I believe, of several books, but the one that caught my eye and I wanted you to talk about a bit is the one called The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. And if you don't mind, I want to read a little bit of a segment of that, or from a paragraph, I guess, in that I came across, and then let you kind of take it from there. And I quote, Jay-Z's plan is to eschew politics in favor of a sole focus on economics. Black capitalist economics with buying power as a central philosophy, as the only hope, quote unquote, for freedom, and all presented as progressive, pro-black empowerment messaging. So you wrote it, my brother. So take it from there. What's wrong with Jay-Z's plan, if you will?
So my book is a little smaller than yours, but
it is not, man.
No, it is. I mean, it is smaller.
Oh, is it?
But yeah, it's a short book. It's not long, but what I was the crux of the argument is simply that we're often told, and particularly, for those of us, from my perspective, who spend time in activist spaces or journalist spaces, we hear all the time that Black people have this $1 trillion of buying power that we just, ignorantly spend away, and we buy rims and hair, and and that's why we're poor. And if we invested, and if we put our money in Black banks, and if we bought from Black businesses, and just had greater financial literacy, we could all be better. And I'm not saying people should be, irresponsible, but that's not why people are poor. So I just wanted to write about what I had been trying to investigate for close to a decade before that. What are the origins of this claim, and is it real? And the short of it is, it's not real. The concept of buying power is misunderstood. It's misreported. It has nothing to do with economic strength. It's about attracting ad revenue to commercial media spaces by convincing corporations that Black audiences of commercial media spaces targeting them can afford to buy the products. And ultimately, it's so that the commercial media can capture the roughly $600 billion that are spent every year in ad revenue. And then to do that, they have to promote that Black people have this money that could be spent on these products. And then it's also misreported to Black audiences that this is a pool of money that again, we're just ignorantly spending. So what I was just trying to say there about Jay-Z is that to use him as just one popular example of the way the myth gets brought around. And one way it's brought around, and I was talking about the story of OJ, the track that had become popular, not only because of the song itself, but in particular, in some spaces, it had gained a certain level of popularity because it was being used as an example to condemn poor Black people for being ignorant with their money. Because in the song, Jay-Z is saying, I should have, I could have bought art, I could have bought property, I could have done all these things and been so much richer now if I wasn't stupid. And I'm saying and so I was just trying to highlight that this is part of a broad array of methods used to, or that are used to convey some harmful economic messages and unrealities that Black audiences take on and listen to. And then they start hearing these things, and it's buttressed by an echoing media environment. And people, a lot of people, again, are mythologized into believing that we're poor because of our ignorance. And anyway, so I just try to show the history of the origin of that claim, and in this case, how pop culture and popular media perpetuate that mythology.
Mm-hmm. So talk more about, if you don't mind, the origin then of the claims. How did those things originate or develop?
Yeah. So the real origin is that around the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, the U.S. government and the business elite were trying to figure out a way to keep the working community from rebelling. And one of the methods that they came up with was to develop, among other things, cost of living surveys, where they could figure out basically how much does it cost to produce all the goods that you want to sell to everybody, but you want but to set the prices at such that you could maximize profit, but make them affordable to the people you are underpaying as laborers, who then you want to go out and shop and buy your product. The credit card hadn't been developed yet, and all that stuff that would come, some years later. And poor people were saying, look, we know we're helping produce so much more wealth and products. You all are making all this money. We're being underpaid, and we're literally not able to buy as much based on our salary as we were years before. And to again stem the tide of social unrest, those in power try to, let's figure out again how exactly we can measure paying people enough so that they can go shopping, but not enough that they actually become, that they don't need to be laborers, and that we can still make as much money as possible. Then over time, and I'll skip ahead a little bit here, but over time, as a method of convincing Black people who were formerly enslaved that they could become part of the new American society without revolutionizing it, without rebelling against it. There was this mythology of an opening of access to the middle class, an opening of Black business, and and particularly after the Second World War, when the United States was the singular dominant power, there was this real shift. With a very beginning a very conscious effort. Let's make some arrangements so Black people can start some businesses, become part of the mythology of the middle class America. And John H. Johnson, who was famous for creating Ebony and Jet, was one of the biggest in the Black commercial media community to realize what was happening. He literally creates the documentary, the seminal documentary called Selling the Negro, which is a documentary meant to teach white corporate America that Black people are not a threat. Black people just want to be middle class. Black people pay their bills. Black people have buying power and will buy your products and can make you rich. That was the point of the documentary. And that's where the phrase buying power starts to become reformed, newly popular, and specifically targeted to Black communities. Because just in general, just to step back quickly, buying power as an assessment, a marketing assessment, is applied to every part of the community, every part of every sector of the countries, from different demographics among the citizenry, to municipalities, to federal governments, to corporations. Everybody's assessing their buying power, and all that means is how capable are you to enrich those who are selling the goods in the economy. Buying power is not a measurement of wealth or income. It's a measurement of, it's a rough estimate of what can be spent and what those who are selling all these products are hoping to capture. And it's roughly tied to the collective income of all Black people, of all people. Or who are being measured, in this case, all Black people. So, but to say that Black people collectively earn roughly $1 trillion, and then that presents a buying power, is mythology, because anyone who spends everything that they earn obviously is not being responsible, obviously is not wealthy or rich. They're just helping to enrich those who own the economy, which are the same elite that we struggle against. So then the last point I'll just quickly make is that, and then I'll hopefully can fill in some things if necessary. But so once John H. Johnson starts that and makes that sort of corporate business arrangement, what has emerged certainly after the 70s, where Richard Nixon and others consciously tried to develop the idea of Black capitalism as a replacement for radical notions of Black power. And then certainly over the last 50 years, what has really consolidated is this Black commercial media group, a Black bourgeoisie, a white corporate America, a political class that runs the country, that doesn't want rebellion and wants Black people and all people to feel like they have hope in this society. And we have a messaging echo chamber that has been created again, through bad journalism, itself being produced by the very commercial outlets that want to attract ad revenue by convincing ad buyers that Black audiences have money to spend on their products. We just get this mythologized, messaging system about Black economics that has nothing to do with the actual condition of Black people in this country. So,
I've got two. You just talking brought up two ideas. One, and if they're relevant, then speak on them if you don't mind. One, when I was looking at your some of the material earlier, I started thinking about E. Franklin Frazier.
That's right.
And I'm wondering, were some of your ideas at all informed by some of the, and I really like E. Franklin Frazier at all. Were any of your concepts informed at all by him? And that's one. And then the other thing is, after you talk about that, could we get into what then does boycotting and that kind of thing, is that at all an efficacious enterprise or tactic anymore? And so why don't you address the first one, and then maybe we could get in the second.
So the first one's very easy. E. Franklin Frazier played a big part in what I try to put together here. So just very quickly, E. Franklin Frazier, Earl O'Farry in his book, The Myth of Black Capitalism, and then a more recently published book, not necessarily politically where I am, but in terms of its history of Black banking, The Color of Money by Mirza Baradaran, are sort of three texts that I sort of build a basis.
Could you cite those again, please?
So sure. In fact, Mirza Baradaran's book, and it's funny because I just did an interview with a discussion critiquing what she leaves out in terms of Black politics, but in terms of the history of Black banking and its shortcomings from, again, not a particularly radical political perspective, but just a mainstream assessment. It's a very strong book, and it has a lot of very important history, not about Black radical politics, not about Black independent movements, etc., but about the really the mythology that Black banking can really move us anywhere. So of course there was The Black Bourgeoisie from E. Franklin Frazier, and then another small book that I don't have in arm's reach called The Myth of Black Capitalism by Earl O'Farry, who I believe now is known as Earl O'Farry Hutchinson. And his book really is just a summary argument over why, sort of a broader argument than my own, but it's basically making the point that this calling it Black capitalism it's still capitalism, and that economic system just is not going to help anybody, Black, white, or otherwise. So yeah, that was very important, and part of what I'm arguing here is that this Black commercial journalism media class is a Black bourgeoisie looking to capture white corporate money while presenting itself as Black and progressive, and giving solid information, at least when it comes to Black economics. And and unfortunately, I'm challenging that. What was
boycotting?
Boycotting, right. So the short answer for me is no, that boycotting has been, like a lot of things, I think, mythologized and misunderstood. And then we're constantly told to think back to Dr. King, to the Montgomery bus boycott. And there's a couple of things that are important to understand about what that was and wasn't. One, that was a sustained more than a 1 year long effort to target one city's bus system, just to get the concession of not having to sit at the back of the bus. To extrapolate that as a tactic to go against international conglomerates, to me, is part of the fantasy. Now, all of this for me is part of and I think I've shown even in my work, and there's much more in some other more, I think, great works to make this point. But the real issue is that from the moment, and I want to say it in a specific way to be provocative intentionally, from the moment enslaved African people made it clear that form of enslavement would not be sustainable through poisoning, maroonage, killings, field burnings. I mean, just, people, one of the horrors of our history is that we have really not been made to appreciate how much fighting went on. I mean, for every Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and Gabriel Prosser, there were hundreds of women and men and children who found all kinds of ways to mess up the system. to the point where by the time we're at the late 1850s, 1860s, white people were terrified and looking for any way possible to keep the social relationship and the extractive relationship, but without all that danger. So there has just been a constant desire to figure out how are we going to manipulate these people. Like I remember there's this great book from the 1970s, I believe, Donald Spivey. I've never forgotten this one quote from his book, Schooling for the New Slavery. And this one line where he said, the schoolhouse was meant to replace the stability lost by the demise of slavery. In other words, they designed a school system and a labor system and a policing system and now a media system, all meant to say, look, we know we can't put you in chains on the field, but we're going to now make more money from your labor by telling you you're free, limiting your actual capabilities, limiting your collective ability to earn and become economically or politically powerful, and to produce much more mythology that will fill the gap. So economically, when you look at the graphs that are from production and employment graphs from the 70s to today, the production graphs go like this. They go from the baseline here straight up. They're just working people have just been producing and producing. We just make so much. And the wealth to the top 1%, the graphs look like this. But if you look at the real wages paid to all working people, it's like this. So the way because today everybody's talking about a $15 minimum wage fight. Honest economists have been saying for years, if you want to get us back to where we were in the 70s, you would have to start paying people at least $25 an hour just to get us to where we were in the 70s. Now, to fill that gap from we're producing all of this but not getting paid more, that's where I was saying the credit cards and all that stuff came in. The loans, the credit, the all of that came in. So we're not going to pay you more, but we still need you to buy all these products you're producing. So we'll just give it on credit. And that's why we see, so anyway, so symbolically, politically, that same kind of thing had to be done. We're sort of working on a credit card of politics, so to speak. Like we're being told you have all this freedom, all this political power, but you really don't. It's got a limit on it. There's a debt to it. It comes with interest, and that's why today you see economically, by 2053, reports say Black wealth will hit zero. The Black people have the same 0.1% of the nation's wealth that we had in 1860. From 1992 to 2012, Black people created more than 2 million businesses, but the amount of the amount of money captured by the annual revenue spent across the country on shopping went down to 0.03%. So in other words, Black studies have shown Black people are actually better than most communities in saving money and being frugal and responsible with money. And yet we're nowhere. And yet, so to fill the gap between we're working hard, we're going to school, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, we're paying our bills, we're saving money, to fill the gap between that and realizing that doesn't improve anything, we're sold a bunch of mythology that it's because we're not spending money properly and we're not investing properly and we're not doing this. And one of my latest pet peeves is this crypto thing. We're not buying crypto. If you would invest in crypto, that would be Spike Lee did a commercial saying he literally said crypto, if you get off of money and get into crypto, that is the revolution. It will free you. I mean, this is, so anyway, sorry for that long answer, but my point is, that's anyway, that's it. That's where we go.
Well, okay, so how does that then relate to the next chapter in the book, or that says the myth prevents unrest? Yeah. Is unrest the answer? I mean, the solution, as it were? I mean, that's somewhat of an amorphous.
Well, I mean, yeah, but my answer is just as amorphous. That we need. So yes, the unrest is that we need a political movement to assume power. And instead of the mythology is that we're told to build businesses and get our money right, but the reality that's not how wealth is that is not how wealth is created. Wealth is the result of a political process. It's a political process that determines what is wealth and who gets it. And we saw that last summer. The wealthiest in this country saw that with people staying home from COVID, we weren't spending and creating wealth for them like we used to. So they just went to the Congress and wrote up the CARES and HOPE Acts and created trillions of dollars for themselves out of nothing, and fed it right back to themselves. And that's how Wall Street did better last year. They did just as well last year as ever, while the rest of us are like, how did that happen? How did and my point in that is that that's political power. Political power says, listen, we create $20 trillion a year in this country in gross domestic product, and yet it's just goes to the people that own the economy. They get almost all that wealth, but we help create it. When I buy a piece of pizza, that transaction helps create wealth as much as the owner of the pizzeria is creating wealth. If I'm not buying it, she or he or they aren't making money off of it.
Yeah,
it's the exchange that creates the wealth. When I pay a bill, when you pay your bills, when you go to, when you buy a $7 latte, or you whatever we do creates wealth. But it just goes to 1% of the population. And it would be public policy to say, from a different, however we write it, it could be developed any number of different ways, that would say, wait a minute, the wealth that's created from that transaction has to be redistributed, so we don't have this kind of poverty. So yeah, I'm saying that as I was just outlining before, the prevention of social unrest was the explicit discussion of those in power saying, working people are going to rebel. And I even cite more recent examples of the wealthiest in our society saying, if the rich don't give something back in some form or fashion, these people are going to rebel. And he wasn't just talking about Black people, he's talking about everybody.
Well, I've heard several commentators, cite Franklin Delano Roosevelt, saying that the New Deal, was about saving capitalism. Like, if you don't give the people something, they're going to turn this place out sooner or later.
And remember what we learned later on from Colonel Darlington Butler, Butler, something like that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Who was invited by the capitalist elite as a former Marine colonel to lead a bunch of troops, 500,000 strong, to take over Roosevelt, to lead a coup against Roosevelt, because Roosevelt's saying that's exactly the point. The guy I'm citing, the venture capitalist I'm citing, the people in the turn of the century referenced in the book, Roosevelt, all of them were saying the same thing. We don't want to overturn the system. God, no. We just need to give them something so that they don't come get us. And the owners of Firestone and all of those companies back in Roosevelt's time were like, oh, hell no. Not giving them nothing. Go get us a colonel. Go get us somebody to lead an army. Can you imagine that? I mean, that is just, it's insane. And by the way, the New Deal didn't even help Black people. Like that's the other thing. Like, it didn't even help Black people. It was insufficient on that front. And then, because as you said, it was designed to save capitalism, and that's what they did. And so that's what we're seeing now. I mean, so the stopgaps in between major events like that is just to present all this mythology around, you're not poor because of a system that needs you to be poor. You're poor because you bought those tennis shoes.
I didn't see your video, the limiting framework of reparations, but the issue of reparations is something that's near and dear to me still. I was very, very active in the movement through Cobra for about 10 years for reasons personal. I had stopped formally, working with the organization, but I'm still committed. I think I'm more committed now than even then, if that was possible. Back in the early 2000s, early mid 2000s. I still think it's critical. But what did you mean by that? The limiting framework of reparations, and can you tie it at all to what you're?
Yeah, I mean, it's all very much tied together. I mean, it's not that I'm against reparations. It's that I think, as the title suggests, that it's designed to distract us and to limit us from what I think should be our goal. So on the one hand,
I would argue we are distracted from reparations. There isn't.
But I'm saying
there isn't an effective reparations movement. But anyway, go ahead.
I hear you on that too. But I think part of the issue is that I don't think part of it is that I think reparations depend. Again, it's discussed usually in unspecified vague ways, but in general, this idea that we should get I don't want the one-time payment, or I don't want apologies, or I don't want anything that would leave this system unadjusted, that would leave us similarly vulnerable to the same conditions we find ourselves in today, and where we don't have any authority over the future of the world. So, for instance, if reparations were, so ultimately, what I am suggesting is that tactically, reparations be expanded into a broader political movement to change society, because, again, never mind disagreements or differences over how reparations would be formed. This society won't even allow a vote on a bill just to they won't even pass a bill to engage in a study. Both the Senate bill and the House version can't even get passed, can't even and only ask for a study for reparations. They're not a reparations bill. There's no plan on them. There's no, and those won't even get passed because of a number of, obviously, racism, but even the black lackeys that get brought up there, like Herschel Walker most recently, and others to give some nonsense. So my thing is, and then we're pitted against one another. So the idea that 2/3 of a country, which what would be necessary to pass an amendment in the Constitution, 2/3 of this country would have to sign off on a reparations package being delivered just to Black Americans. They're never going to do that. They're just not going to do that. So what I would suggest is broaden the project, make it bigger, make it all encompassing. And while it might mean we don't get the specific call of reparations for our particular history, it would mean a material collective advance for our community beyond what is ever being promised from some specific claim. We can't even get Black presidents and Black vice presidents to say that they would do anything specifically for Black people. So that's what I'm saying. So for instance, so just real quick, so one example, tactically, I would suggest expand reparations to say, yes, Black people deserve reparations. We have had a very specific and horrific experience here. But let's leave room for other people in their lanes, because this is where they go and get defensive anyway. So when white people say, well, we haven't had anything to do with that and we suffer too, fine. White workers also deserve reparations. They have suffered incredibly in this country. Fine. Asian workers, Asian people in this country deserve some reparations beyond what they got, certainly after that World War II nonsense. The Japanese got nothing. Their land in California was worth billions. And I think they got $20,000 was their reparations package. And then just as we saw with Obama, we would not allow white people to say, we gave you a black president or we gave you a check, so now everything is good, you have to leave us alone. And we would be able to say, if all these people deserve reparations, cool. Let's start with a couple things. A debt jubilee. Everybody's debt is wiped out. Every debt, school, mortgage, car, everything, credit card, everything. Everybody goes to zero. Let's start with that. $25 minimum wage for all employees, bar none, bare minimum across the country. Universal health care. Done. Let's wrap. That's a wrap. If we just did those three things, Black people would be better off, and we might have a chance politically. We might have a chance to have a different society. Then Black people would have the space and the resources to, on our own, develop independent institutions and movements to heal all the other elements of a reparations package that white people can't do. All the other kinds of healing, all the spiritual, all the cultural, having taken care of the material largely. I mean, if people don't owe anything, if people have health care, if people, dang, I forgot my third thing already. If people have those
education,
I think education, debt, it was a debt jubilee.
No, well, let me just
there we go. Go
let
ahead.
me just offer something that's almost parallel to what you're talking about, because a social democratic movement is absolutely imperative. Now we can, I don't know, some may have a more radical one, but this predatory capitalist, thing that's going on, that's an existential threat to humanity. And this, what's going on right now is just, it's unsustainable. We should all, as human beings, be marching against it, organizing against it, and trying to formulate a new world and a new country and a new whatever. But within that context, and I'm I'm right with you on that. But within that context, the Holocaust that was and is our existence has to be accounted for. You know what I mean? It has to be brought. We have to get this. We have to have a settlement, an agreement, a come to Jesus moment over this. You know what I mean? And I think we can move in those directions simultaneously. I think we can. And I don't see the thing that is so bothersome with me. And let me give you an anecdote, because you mentioned the Japanese Americans. I was in Chicago one time and talking with a elite black person who was he was the head of a hospital, and he was talking about he was just going on about just how fortunate he had been, and he was name dropping. He had been with this president and that guy and this rich person, blah blah. And I was like, man, when can I get out of here? Because I was actually there with somebody else, and it was like this guy's retirement party. And he happened to say, yeah, some of my best friends are this couple, this Japanese woman from Oregon or somewhere, who her dad was one of the wealthiest men on the West Coast, and he had been interned, during the World War II, and he come out and, somehow, made a fortune. And that perked my interest, because I was actually really into, like I was an official in Cobra at that time. I said, oh, wow, really? I said, this woman, did she get I forget, what was it, 20 million or something that they had given? No. They had a settlement.
the settlement it came out to $20,000 per person.
Per person, okay.
Yeah, that
I
was
said, did she get the 20,000? This multi-billionaire heiress. He said, not only did she get the 20,000, she got her lawyers to rendezvous and get together and on how they could go back and get more because the 20 grand wasn't enough.
obviously.
And she was like, all right, I'm a billionaire, but it was a crime, and you have to pay for the crime. And the problem with me is what and you touched on it, is not. I don't care. I don't expect Joe Biden. I don't expect Bernie Sanders. I don't expect any of them to speak for me in terms of reparations and the crime against our people. The problem is we don't. I'm not talking about you and I, but
I understand.
until we have to get a critical mass of our people who are down with this, who have a collective understanding and appreciation of what this is about. This isn't about there can never be a settlement that actually repays black people for what it is. What it should be about is part of a trek, if you will, towards self-determination and having a capital base that allows you to fight, to have some tools to build, like you said, institutions and that kind of thing to help repair us, help repair our communities, and that kind of thing is really what I think it's all about. It's certainly what all the early reparationists were about, and certainly by early I mean the founders of Encobra and what have you.
Sure.
What is just so aggravating is on two sides, I feel like we black people, they ain't talking about white folks and none of that. Us, our communities, on one side we've got the old school, me and us, who have been kind of wedded into this. Well, if we do the HR 40 thing and get past, and how many years do we have to see that isn't going to happen? And then you've got this other group that came along, the newly, and that dude from Duke, what the, I don't even.
Sandy Garrity.
Who is like, okay, they just invented this thing of, what we want is a check, but we just can't make sure that maybe 3% of our population of immigrant, if as long as they don't get it and we get a check, we're cool.
Look, this is sort of my point about the distraction and the limited framework, because and I've discussed this with Darity and others, and on this I just don't agree. Like,
don't start me with him, man, please.
Well, because this is sort of my thing. I mean, my thing is that when that's why I think reparations is too limited a framework, because it leaves room for all of the hucksters, the people that just want an applause line, the people who have created a cottage industry of collecting checks from black communities and white audiences that are happy to hear this because they know it's never going to happen. So they don't want to hear anything about so that's what I'm saying. So like, if we make it bigger and make it part, so because really what I'm saying, this is really what I'm saying. What I'm really saying is that personally, I don't care about getting any sort of acknowledgement from this current world for past crimes that isn't part of them being forced to acknowledge those crimes in the face of a society that has been revolutionized in their face. So that's what I mean. We need, so ultimately on this part, we certainly agree. We need political organization. We need more people to be organized with a clarity of what it is that we want and what we can legitimately expect. There is never going to be the coming to Jesus moment they're never coming to Jesus on this. That's not it. They're not. We have to. I keep thinking of this movie. I know it's crazy to do this, but there's this movie called Runaway Jury, and I don't know why this scene stays.
I've
in
never
my
heard
head.
of it.
It's a movie with John Cusack and Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman, and it's about a rigged jury and this, that, and the third. And there's Gene Hackman is supposed to be the bad guy, and Dustin Hoffman's supposed to be the good guy, and they meet each other as lawyers during a courtroom break in the bathroom. And Dustin Hoffman gives him this perfect liberal guy speech about you should behave this way. And what about truth and justice and the right of the common man? And Gene Hackman in this scene just looks at him with this perfect, like he's taller than him, he's leaning in on it. He just says, I don't give a damn. He's like, I don't care. You have to understand, I don't care. So like, that's how these white folks are. They don't care that they did this.
I don't care that they don't care. And I care that we don't care, and that's what just drives me up a wall. And you know, and frankly, you know, following Darity, you know, if I can envision, in fact, I never forget seeing a white guy, and this was years ago, saying, "Oh God, let's just pay them, and so I don't have to hear anymore." You know, see, I could envision some Republicans, you know, a Trumpist, you know, saying, "All right, let's write." They said they want a check. Let's write a check. It ain't going to be what they want, but all right, let's get somewhere. See what they can negotiate, because they know where it's going to end up. If you don't control any factors of production, where's the money going to go? But and for these people who talk that talk, it's so ignorant and annoying. It just drives me crazy. But you know what, man? I think we agree on a lot more. What'd you say?
Real quick. The only thing I would want to challenge in what you just said is that I think the Republicans are horrible, but I think the slickness of it would be a Democrat that would do exactly what you're talking about. It would be a Democrat that would say, let's give them a check so we don't have to hear about this anymore. And we would forever have them in our corner, you know. But you're right. You know, my real point is I think we just need something bigger. So I'm not against reparations.
I think
we should think.
I think bigger in reparations for black people is yet to be realized and even envisioned. Because really to think about that, certainly in terms of capital formation and what kind of, you know, the idea of us even thinking collectively, you know, business schools at Morgan, and where do they teach about worker-controlled businesses and shit? It doesn't. So, you know, we've got so much to even think about. You know what I mean? Non-profit businesses, blah blah. You know, anything along. They exist. They're all over the place, but we don't talk about them.
No, but I don't want us to, because I don't want to, because this is again my point. The answer is not in nonprofits or co-ops. The answer is in, we have to have a whole new political apparatus. People could call it a new world, a new society, a revolution.
We need that too, but they can.
But what I'm saying, because nonprofits are part of the same problem. They're part of the same, you know, co-ops can't create wealth for poor people. They can be helpful. I'm not condemning them, but if we're talking about overturning where we really are, we need to have a whole new thing. And I really agree with the old phrase that we need an equality of outcome, not an equality of opportunity. So just to skip ahead, because I think we're probably going long here, but that's sort of the point in my own argument's conclusion here, that I want us to move away from discussions of buying power and black business and even reparations. And I want us to move to higher stages of political organization and political struggle to say, if we're in this society and it's producing $20 trillion every year in GDP and gross domestic product, which is just a measurement of all the goods and services spent on people who own, for the people who own those goods and services. All we have, if we're helping create that wealth, it needs to be redistributed in such a way that this kind of inequality isn't coming down on anybody. Then we can get to other levels, because like, I don't want reparations from a society that is this exploitative that is going to continue to damage people in this country and around the world just to give me a check or whatever I'm supposed to get. I don't want to perpetuate mythology that we can have a revolutionary and improved world through businesses and co-ops and nonprofits and all of that. We need something bigger. So anyway,
hey man, look, let's keep talking about this.
Absolutely, and
get there, man. This has been great, though. God knows.
Can you tell me quickly, because I haven't read your book yet, what is the myth? Can you summarize for me and anyone else?
It's actually misnamed.
Okay.
It's actually misnamed because it should be plural. It should be the myth of rock and roll, because rock and roll is this very narrow, it's from a perspective of who, very narrow concept. It's not a narrow. From their perspective, it's a narrow concept that basically says, rock and roll is the synthesis of rhythm and blues and country music that started sometime around the middle of the 1950s. What they're actually talking about is something called rockabilly, right, which was mostly not mostly Elvis. Elvis was the biggest star of rockabilly. Bill Haley from down here in Chester was one of the pioneers of that. But that was just one style of rock and roll, and it was a latter style. Okay, rock and roll
style,
huh?
And it was copycat. They were copycatting.
They were copycatting it, but rock and roll had started as a musical form in the mid '40s. Okay, and the technical term for it, really, by the mid '40s, was in terms of Billboard listings of music, was race music. And so by the end of the '40s, and I wish I could reference my book right now, because Jerry, I can't remember his name, from Atlantic Records at that time worked for Billboard magazine and said, hey, I love this music that these black people are doing. And
Jerry Heller, is it?
No. He's with Jerry. I won't be able to find it right now. But anyway, he's the one who started the change race music in technical, formal term to R&B, rhythm and blues, which I say is is more of a definition than it is a description.
What? So they could
the
sell
colloquial term,
it though, right?
Huh?
So they could sell. I thought that was to make it more saleable to white audiences.
It may have been, but it was selling to white audiences anyway.
Facts.
White people were getting down with it. The whole world, was getting down to this music, this phenomenon that had emerged. In Louis Jordan is the father of rock and roll. He had the most popular band, and Quincy Jones said the first rock band was I just forgot his name that quick. Louis Jordan's band.
Louis Jordan, yeah.
Yeah, and that emerged. Was called the jump. He was doing what was called jump blues, and it was the jump blues that just was blowing up all over the world. At the end of the World War II. This is what people were listening to all over the world. That and the vocal groups. Red Fox doing the "If I Didn't Get," that kind of stuff. We always had a slow romantic side to things as well as the upbeat thing. So that's what's taken over. And a guy came in Cleveland, Ohio. This white guy who had a record store said to a guy named Alan Freed, who was a jazz and classical DJ. He was also a musician. Came to him and said, "Man, you need to play this music that these white people are buying in my record store." And he's the one who really, they say coined the phrase, but really popularized the phrase rock and roll. Or his first rock and roll, he's credited with having the first rock and roll concert in 1951. All black artist.
Well, that was the reason I know of him is because when I was doing some research on this some years ago, what I thought was interesting, I was looking into the history of payola, where he's
You're
famously
right.
the one who took the pay for play and had his career destroyed over it. But what I found, and I don't remember my sourcing on this, it's been too long, but what I remember finding was that the real reason his career was destroyed was not just the payola, but was because of the involvement of black music, because the parallel was made between him and Dick Clark, because Dick Clark was also doing payola, but he was even doing it worse because he had his own artists that he had on his own label that he was paying himself to promote.
Right here in Philly, by the way, that got started.
Right, but he was only doing white artists at the time, so he wasn't punished in the way that Freed was. So I thought,
hey, Doc,
I thought that was interesting.
Doc, why don't you stay on? Let me say goodbye to everybody and cut this short, but stay on, okay? I'm gonna cut the recording. Hey, look, everybody, we back with Getting the Record Straight. Thank you to Dr. Jared Ball, and you can look forward to these again at least monthly, I think, going forward. So thanks so much, Doc. Thanks so much. Stick around for a while so we can chat for a minute.
Right on. Peace, everybody.
Peace, everybody. Let me see. Okay.